Hello everybody. So today we're going to be looking at the key features of graphs. So what we're talking about when we say the key features, that could apply to a lot of different things. Okay, so we're not going to be looking at everything that could be considered a key feature of a graph. We're going to be focusing on a few of them because those are the ones we're going to build on as we approach more things going on with lines and then quadratics later. So we're going to be looking at maxima, minima, and when graphs are increasing, decreasing, or constant. Okay. So this is kind of broken up into two different groups here. So we're going to talk about each of them in turn. All right. So maxima and minima together, by the way, are known as extrema. And that's kind of the umbrella term for anytime you have a maxima or minima. By the way, maxima and minima are just the plural forms of maximum and minimum, which you may have encountered those words a little more frequently than maxima or minima. So a maximum amount of something or a minimum of fuss or whatever phrase you've heard these in before. But so these are just the plural forms of those. So when I'm looking at a graph, say, if I have maybe a graph that looks like this, I'm looking for maxima and minima, and these are in their own little worlds, okay? So, actually, let's not use blue. Let's switch this up a little bit so you can see. This is considered a maximum point. It's called a relative maximum, but we're going to get to that later. Because there are no higher values, no higher y values in the general area of this point. There are over here, but in terms of graphs, that's rather far away. Okay, so right around it, everything else is lower, so it's a maximum. Down here, it would be a minimum because it is the lowest point around it. Everything's higher than it on either side. Okay, so these are considered a maximum and a minimum, which are both extrema. Okay. So if I'm talking about where these are located, they have some odd ways of phrasing this that you want to get in the habit of seeing because they don't ask for things explicitly very often. They ask for them in a kind of coded language. So if they ask where a maximum or where a minimum occurs, that's talking about our x-axis. Okay. So this one, the maximum is located at -2, and our minimum would be at +2, because that's my x-axis. If they ask what the maximum value is, or the minimum value, that's the y-coordinate. So in this case, it would be, the maximum value would be 4, and the minimum value is about -1.5. So if I have these coordinates, I can get both of those pretty quickly. So this is saying it's located at -2 with a value of 4. And our minimum here is located at 2 with a value of -1.5 or -1.5. So when they ask where or what the maximum value is, they're not looking for the entire point. They're looking for specific parts. So that's kind of confusing because we don't usually refer to it as that. We'll call it the x-coordinate or the y-coordinate. But that's the contextual way they're referring to it, is where and values. Okay. All right. And then looking at our last part of increasing, decreasing, and constant, we'll even use a similar graph here. And for consistency, we're going to keep those points, but I don't want to clutter that graph up too much. It'll be hard to see what's going on. Okay, so when I'm talking about increasing, decreasing, or constant, I'm talking about whether my values, my y values, my y coordinates are getting larger, smaller, or staying the same as I'm going from left to right. So we're always traveling our graph along this way. So these go together really importantly because those, oh, I forgot to mark that one, our maximum and minimum are extrema. Those are where the increasing, decreasing, or constant state changes. Okay, so you don't have to do this, but I think it's helpful visually to draw lines that go through your extrema because it helps break apart the graph visually. Okay, and then because after I break those apart, in between or on either side of those lines, I should only have one pattern happening. It should be either always be increasing, always be decreasing, always be constant, something like that. Okay. All right. So if I look on this side, this is confusing for a lot of people. It looks like it's going down because our arrow's pointing down, but remember that's going to the left. I don't want to go left. I'm starting at the left and going this way, so this graph is increasing. Okay, so this in section, we'll call this section 1, 2, and 3. So section 1 is increasing from left to right. And then here, we're still going left to right, so this one is going down. So section 2 is decreasing. And here, this is sharply increasing again. Okay. So I think it's sometimes helpful if you imagine a small stick figure and just kind of walking along. If they're going uphill, that's increasing. If they're going downhill, it's decreasing. Okay? Or if they hit something that's perfectly horizontal, that's constant, and I'll show you that momentarily. So sometimes when we're doing this, though, we want a range. So you do that with inequalities. So I'm looking at my x value here. And in terms of increasing, decreasing, or constant, we're going to pretty much always use x. So, and I want it's increasing for all the values that are smaller than this point at, or this line at -2. So it's x is less than -2 would be an increasing section here. And then we'll get to the middle one in a second because it's a little different. So this one, I want all the points that are bigger here than 2, or greater than 2. So I'm going to write x is greater than 2, and that would be when it's increasing on this side. So my two spaces it's increasing is when x is less than -2 or when x is greater than 2. When we have a middle, we have two bounds, so we write it a little bit differently. So it's -2 on the left and +2 on the right. And then it's always set up like this. So I'm saying it's between -2 and 2 by using that symbol. So it's decreasing with that inequality. So it'll take a little bit of practice to get used to, but that's how those are set up.